Good morning, my gorgeous friends on the internet. In this episode, we are going to talk about Redux. All right, Redux. What is Redux? Redux is a state management tool that we can use in our projects. So we can use it in React. We can theoretically use it in different frameworks as well. Now, do I like Redux? No, I don't like Redux. And the reason why you're going to see a lot of people being like, is there's a lot of boilerplate that might be going on into your projects to do a very simple thing. And there's also a lot of new jargony words like dispatch, map state to props, combine reducer, store, is Elvis Presley dead? What's the point of life? So personally, I'm not a big fan, but a lot of jobs really use Redux because when you have a large scale application, you're gonna have some state management tool, and Redux being the most popular one with React, that's the one that they are looking for. So I want to show you all the basic things so you understand how everything works. So in case you're ever gonna get hired, or maybe even use it on your personal projects, but personally I don't think that's really necessary because you can get away with context or just passing down props in React. Oh, and lastly, thank you everybody who joined me on Patreon. That's quite crazy. I haven't even made a video about it, so thank you so much. If you want to support me, there's gonna be a link up here somewhere. You can click it and you're gonna have access to, I'll try to put up as much as possible extra projects for you to make, tutorials, discussions, and source files in Discord, and there's a lot more. So check it out up there, and thank you again so much. Okay, let's get started. First of all, I actually want to show you what Redux solves for us. So in React, I'll throw up Figma here. Oh, look at this design I just made. Very awesome. Okay, so we can imagine that we have this app component. Okay, this is all React. Okay, so we have this app component, and imagine that we're making a movie searching app. So you would actually create a few components to kind of seclude the logic into these small components. So maybe you have a search component that only searches the movies for you. You will have a movie list that displays all the movies. You have a login, and then maybe a individual movie. All right, so from this movie list, you would have another component that displays each individual movie. All right, so just basic React app here. All right, so what we learned is how we can pass data from one place to another. So you can imagine that we would have the data, all right, so the state of our app, of our movie list in here. All right, so if I want to have the movies, I would probably put it in here. Okay, there's no real logic of having the list of movies, so the actual data, in my login. Okay, so let's take this data. I made this a circle because I thought it looked cool. All right, so if I want to have the movie data, so all the movies, I would put the data in here. Okay, very cool. Now this way, I can render out in each individual movie in this movie component. So I can have this data, and if I want to pass down some data from this component to this component, we learned that we can do that with props. So I can pass some data down here. All right. The problem is that we cannot pass data from our movie list to something like search. All right, that's not possible. React only flows in one direction, which is from up here all the way down. All right. So if I want to pass some data from the movie list, I can only pass it down here. So whatever you render inside this movie list, in this case, we render the movies, the movie, an individual movie, that's the only one that we can pass data to. So how can we solve that problem? Maybe I want to have access to this data with the movies inside my search. So whenever I search for something, I can examine that data and return a new movie list. So that's the first problem here. And the way you would fix this is called moving up the state or lifting up the state. I don't know what they call it these days, but the idea is that you don't have the data about the movies inside the movie list. You would put it up here to the app. All right, and that way you can pass it down to the movie list if you want. You can have access to it in the search if you want. So again, you can just pass it down in props, and now you have access to all the movies inside the search. Okay, and same goes here. So I can pass it additionally down here, and here maybe I can choose not to render things out if I'm not logged in. Okay, now the problem is here, the more components you have, the crazier this is going to get. Okay, and also why would we have the app, the data with the movies in our app here? That doesn't really make any sense. Okay, usually we want to have all the logic inside the component that really uses it. So movie list in here. So that's kind of the problem that we're trying to solve. Also, imagine that we also want to have an action. So maybe down here, the movie, I want to delete a specific movie. So that means that we would also have to have a function, all right, that deletes the movie from this data state. So we would also have to pass that all the way down here and then delete it, and that's going to affect here. So it goes really crazy really quickly. So what Redux does for us is we don't add the data in here in the app or the movies list. All right, you can imagine that we kind of seclude this data into its own place. All right, so this is a whole brand new place. I'll drag it out here and we cannot see it. Thank you, Figma. You are really awesome. So where is that? Where is that thing? Grab, look, I cannot grab it anymore. This is incredible. But you can imagine that we have our data now stored completely separately here. All right, here. Perfect. And now this way, whenever I want to use the data, so this can be the movies list, this can be about anything I want. All right, so we store the entire state separately here. And then whenever I want to access something, I can just go to the component I need the information from, so maybe the movie list, and I can just add a bit of code, and then I can pull out the necessary data that I need only in this component. So I don't have to pass down things in props and change the data and things like that. So this gives us access to a way of accessing data in a component, also changing the data and things of that sort. So that's kind of how everything works. Now let's actually set this up in VS Code for it to all make sense. So I have an empty project here, so I just set up create React app. If you want to set it up too, all you have to do is run npx create React app and then give it a name. In this case, I gave it learn Redux. So run that. Once it runs, it's going to create you this new folder here. All right, and this is just an empty React project. And also what you want to install is npm install React, my apologies, Redux, and react-redux, like so, okay? So Redux is the actual state management package, and react-redux gives us the ability to connect React and Redux together, okay? So let's get rid of this. Make sure to install that. I already did. So I'm not going to run it again. So as you can see, everything is installed. This version is 7.1, which is really nice because it's going to give us access to use React Redux with hooks. Okay, I talked too much. So let's oh my God, I cannot speak. Let's do this from scratch. I'm going to delete a few files here that we're not going to need. So open up your source file here, and I'm going to get rid of app.test.js. We're not going to need these. Let's also get rid of app.css. That's fine. Let me mute this. Okay, the logo, we don't need the logo. And let's go into app and just get rid of everything. I'm just going to leave an empty just hello. Okay, just for now, we're just going to set everything up here in index.js. So I'm going to show you the basics of it, and then we're going to hook it up to React to make everything work just nice. So the first thing I'm going to need is that thing called store. So store. Now, what is the store? The store is basically the state, a globalized state. So everything I want to have, take a look at a Figma example here. So the store basically holds all the data or state for our application. So you wouldn't have a data of state only with the movie list here, like you would normally in React. So I would have the movie list here, maybe some information, some data or state about the login here. What you would do is you would separate everything and you would have one big state that you can access anywhere and all your components. So you would separate everything, you would have all your data in this big store. Okay, so that's all it is. It's just a big data here that holds all the information and state for our application. Okay, so that's the store. So a globalized state. Okay. The second thing that we're going to need is something called an action. Now, action sounds like you're going to do something, but it's not really in the case of Redux. So what an action is, it kind of describes what you want to do. All right. So you can imagine, and this one, we're going to keep it simple. We're just going to build a super simple state that's going to be called counter, and it's going to be set to 0. And whenever we add, maybe we hit the button plus, it's going to increment by 1. All right. So an action would be called increment. All right. It's just a name. You just give it whatever you want to do. So you just say, hey, my action is increment. So that's what we're going to create here, increment. And there's also another one called reducer. And what a reducer is, it basically describes how your actions transform the state into the next state. Okay, so what's going to happen is that this action is going to be called, the reducer is going to check which action you did, and based on the action, it's going to modify our store up here. All right, see how this gets a bit really confusing? So don't worry if you don't get this straight off. We're going to write a bit of example code here, and then I'm going to explain everything. And there's a final step called dispatch. And this is the way where we can actually execute that action. All right, we can say, hey, dispatch this action to the reducer. So we can send that action to the reducer. The reducer is going to check what to do, and then the store gets updated. Okay. Whew. All right, let's take a look at how we can do this, because it's very hard to explain this with theory. So the first thing we want to do is create this store. So how can we do that? Well, we can import it from Redux. So I'm going to say import create store. Make sure you add these curly braces here, from Redux. Okay, that's step 1. You create the globalized state. Perfect. Now this state is going to take 2 things. Actually, it's going to take 1 thing. It's going to take a reducer. So we're not going to create the store yet. This is how we would create it. You would add a let store and set this equal to create store, and you would pass in a reducer. So reducer, all right? And the reducer that we're going to make is going to be called counter, but we're not going to do this yet. Okay, so you remember how I said that an action just kind of describes what you want to do. So imagine you can go to a store and you're like, I'm hungry, all right? So that's the action. Doesn't mean you're actually buying the food, you just describe what you want to do. I'm hungry, all right? So we're gonna do this increment for now. So let's create an action. How does an action look? It's super simple. All an action is just a function that returns an object, okay? A simple function that returns an object. So if I want to increase a counter, I can just create a const, and I'm gonna say increment. It's going to be equal to an arrow function like so. And all this does, again, just remember, it just returns an object. So I'm going to add a type to it, or you can do name. So what's the name of this action? It's going to be increment. I'm going to do it all in uppercase. Usually you're going to see something called type here. That's what people name them, but it's actually just like a name. All right. So what is my action name? Increment. But you're going to see type, so I'm going to keep it type. And yeah, this is what an action is. Now we can create a reducer that's going to take care of all the actions related to our counter. So in theory, we can do another one here. So we can do a decrement, all right? And the type is going to be decrement here. Okay, and now let's set up a reducer. So again, this is just going to be another function. So I can set up a counter, and what this is going to take, again, just an arrow function that's going to return a piece of object. So here, what we can do, well, first of all, we need to add 2 parameters. One's going to be, how is our counter state going to look like? So what's the initial state of our counter? So I can just set state equal to 0 for now. You can also create this separately in a constant or a let here, and then pass it in here. But I can do it in here as well, so that's fine. And the second thing is it's going to take in an action. So now what we can do here is we can switch the action depending on its name. So I can say switch action.type, so it's going to take a look at the name. All right, so either increment or decrement, and based on the name of the action, it's going to do something for us. So let's open up some curly braces here, and we're gonna say case. If our case is increment, then I want to do something here. And what I want to do is I want to return state plus 1. All right, so we're going to take a look at the initial state, which is 0, and then we're going to add 1 to it. Okay, that's all it's going to do. And once we do this, it's going to update our store. So hit save on this, and then we can have another one if we want. So let's do case decrement, all right, because we set that up as well. So what we can do here is we can return state minus 1 if we want. Hit save. All right, so this is our reducer. Now we can actually add it to the store. So store, let's say let store, it's going to be equal to create store, and we can pass in this counter. Okay, and finally, remember to actually execute that action, we need to add dispatch. But before we also do that, let's display it in the console. So to display it, we're going to do this once. We're going to say store.subscribe, and we're not going to use this in react-redux, so you don't have to worry about it too much. But this is just going to take an arrow function, and we're going to say console log store.get state, like so. All right, and this is just going to display our store for us. Okay, so nothing's going to happen yet. So to actually dispatch an action, we're going to say store.dispatch, and all I have to do here is call one that I want. I can say increment. So I can say store dispatch the increment. I'm going to execute this, and that's all I need to do. So let's execute this, and then we're going to see what's up. npm start. All right, let's wait for this to open, and then we're going to recap, and then we're going to implement it with DevTools and everything, so everything is going to make more sense. Okay, so let's see if this loaded up here. Let's open up our console, and let's go here. All right, it's still loading. Come on, boy. Why you do this? My throat is dry. See, this is why. Okay, take a look. We have 1. All right, we got this message here because we haven't used decrement, but we have 1. Okay, so let's take a look at what we did again. What we do is we create the store, which holds all of our state. We have one piece of state now, which is counter. You're going to have multiple reducers depending on what you want to do. You can have a authentication reducer that's going to take care of authentication. You can have a movie list reducer. You can have multiple that we're going to have in our big global state. But for now, we have 1. Okay. What we do is we dispatch an action. All right. So an action, all it is just a function that returns an object with a type increment. So it just has a name to it. All right. And once we dispatch this, our reducer, it's going to take a look at what was dispatched, which action was dispatched. It's going to take a look at the name. So that's why we added switch action.type name. It's going to take a look at the name. And based on the name, it's going to return a piece of state. So in this case, our 0 was the original plus 1. And that's exactly what it did. If I want to decrement, I can do it again. I can say store.dispatch decrement. All right. And I can maybe do this another time. So 2 times. Let's take a look at what's happening. So let's, not this one. Oh my goodness. Google Chrome. As you can see, we have -1 now. All right, so we dispatched this 2 times. Now, the thing is, you kind of set this up once, but as you can see, it kind of took a ton here for us to set this up just to do so little. So this is why I'm saying that Redux can have a lot of boilerplate whenever you have a small project, and it might not be worth it. Okay, but let's set this up with React and see how that works. So let's start from scratch and hope everything is going to make more sense, because with this, I feel like just exercising and practicing this is going to make it easier for you. Okay, and we're also going to add one additional thing. So this is how I usually do it. You're going to find different ways that people do it, but usually I like to add my store in here in index.js and then separate each reducer and action in individual files. So first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to create two folders here. I'm going to create one called reducers and one called actions. So new folder, actions. Okay, perfect. So now what I want to do is I want to create my reducer. So here I'm going to create a new file and I'm going to call this index.js. Okay, and then I'm going to create two here. So let's imagine that we have a counter, and let's imagine that I also have another reducer that's going to take a look at if I'm logged in or logged out, or maybe a toggle of a nav bar. So let's create a new file here. We're going to do kind of the same thing here. I'm going to say counter.js. All right, now let's make another one. New file, and this is going to be, let's say, isLogged.js. All right. So we have two. So let's set up the first one, and we could have copy pasted what we had, but let's just make it again. So I'm going to say const counter reducer. It's going to be equal to, and I'm going to set in a state of 0 and an action. Okay, and we can switch the action.type, which is the name. And depending on what name it has, we're going to execute different things. So I'm going to say case of increment. What I want to do is return a piece of state. So state plus 1. All right. And let's do decrement as well. Case decrement is going to be return state -1. Perfect. All right. So this is all we have. Then we can export this default counter reducer. Okay, let's also set up another one for our isLoggedIn. So let's exit this. Let's go to isLoggedIn. I'm going to create const. Let's name this logged reducer. Set this equal to state and action. All right, these are always the two things that we're going to take in. And for this one, I'm going to set the initial state equal to false. All right, so whenever our application first runs, I want to make sure that we are not logged in. So this is going to be false. Again, we're going to do the same thing over and over again, action.type. And we're going to check the name of it and return a different piece of state depending on the name. So in this case, I'm going to just have one. Let's say case sign in, like that. And when that happens, what I want to do is I'm going to return the opposite of state. So it's going to be true now. All right. Or optionally, what you can do is just say true here. All right. You can also return that. But what I want to do is say the opposite of false. All right. So that's it. Then we're going to export default logged reducer. All right. So we have two pieces of state, which are our reducers. How can we hook that up to our store? Okay. We can go here and we can import our store. So we can say import create store from Redux. Okay, that's step 1. Now we can say const store is equal to create store, and then we can pass it in. But we have a problem here. All right, we have two reducers, and we cannot pass in here counter reducer and the isLogged reducer. That's not gonna work. So another concept that we have is combined reducers. So all that's gonna do is it's gonna take all your reducers and it's gonna combine them together into one reducer that we can actually add to our store. So let's remove everything here, and what we're gonna do is we're gonna add a comma here, and we're gonna say combine reducers. Okay, and actually I created a new file here in our reducers, which is called index.js. So we're gonna add it there just to keep this index file a bit lean. So let's go back into our reducers index.js here. And what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna import all the reducers here. Import the counter reducer from counter. Import, let's say isLogged. You can give any names you want here. Let's say logged reducer. since we exported this as default, all it means is that we can pretty much give it any name we want. From / is logged. All right, so these are the two. Now we want to combine it. So we're going to import from Redux, we want to import combine reducers. This is the one. And now I want to create you can do const all reducers, or you're going to see root reducer, whatever name you want to give to signify that you have all your reducers in this one constant here. So all reducers, I'm going to call it like so, just to keep it simple. And here, all I'm going to do is call combine reducers and then pass in each individual reducer. So it's going to be a function with an object in here. And here, what you can do is you can add a counter reducer, or you can give it any name you want. Counter is going to be my counter reducer. All right, so the name that you're giving it in here is going to be whatever you want. So you can give it whatever name you want, and you can access it by this name. And this is the actual value that's coming from our reducer. All right, so this can be anything you want. You're going to see a lot of people do something like this. Counter reducer, only one thing. And all that means is that that's just some ES6 syntax sugar here. And all it means, if you add one, it actually means this. So you have it both one here and one here. All right, but you can actually shorthand this like so. But what I like to do is actually give it a name that I like. So I can say counter is going to be the count reducer. And then I can add a comma, and logged reducer is going to be, let's say I want it to appear as is logged. And it's going to be logged reducer. So I actually want to show you how everything in here looks so we can visualize it. All right. So we have everything stuck in here. We're going to go back here and import this all reducers now so we can stick it in here. Ooh, okay, import. Let's go to, where is my reducer? So we can go to all reducers, or yeah, all reducer from / reducers. And notice here, I don't actually need to add index because Webpack is automatically going to look at the index.js in this folder. So when you have index, you don't actually have to add index in here. So once we have this, we can add all reducer in here, and we're done. Oh, Jesus. Okay, we're done. And this is just a setup, by the way. We actually haven't done anything yet. Okay, I want to visualize this so we know what's going on. So what we can do is we can import a little cool dev tool from Chrome. So we're having an error here. Reducers does not contain a default export. All right, so we actually need to export this all reducers. Export default all reducers. Perfect. All right, save that. Let's go back here. Let's see, do we still have that error? All right, here I messed up, counter reducer. Let's go back here. Let's see, where is my counter reducer? It's here. Remember, this is just a function and I messed it up. So let's make sure it's a function. Okay, so make sure we add that arrow function there. And also let's go to is logged in and add a default case here. So default, if nothing happens, I just want to return the state. So whatever form our state is, in this case is false, just return false here, state. All right, so hit save and there we go. Okay, so let's take a look in our index.js. We added it to the store, and I actually want to visualize everything in my browser. So we can use an extension here, which is very cool. It's called Redux DevTools extension. All right, and we can install this. We can go down here. We can add it to Chrome. So let's go here to Chrome and Redux DevTools. You can install this. And once you do that, we can add it to our project. If we scroll down here, and we can just copy this in here. So basic store, we copy this, and all we do is, besides our all reducer, we add a comma and we just insert that thing in there. Okay, perfect. Let's take a look if we actually see anything. So in here, in our app, we're gonna press F12. That's gonna give us this. And we can go to our Redux. There it is. And take a look, if I hit state here, it's gonna show everything we have in our state. So we have a counter, which is set to 0. So if we take a look again, I kind of want to show you this multiple times till it kind of makes sense. So here's our reducer again. So as you can see, we have these multiple reducers. Counter reducer, that's one piece of state. We have is logged in, that's another piece of state. And then we use combine reducers to combine everything in here. So as you can see, counter is going to be my counter reducer. So counter, you're going to see, hey, that's counter, the name we gave. I can optionally change this to my count. All right, so we can give any name we want here, and that's going to appear in our store. As you can see, my count. So I'm going to keep this counter for now, but hey, the counter has a piece of state, which is state 0. So as you can see, that's the value that appears here to the right. Same goes with is logged in. Is logged in has a state of false. All right, we gave it a name. So is logged is going to have that state, the logged reducer state. So take a look, it's false. All right, so hope this kind of makes some sense. And this combines everything together and we have the big state. Okay, very cool. What we want to do now is actually hook it up to our app. All right, that's why we're here. And how can we hook this up? So what we can do is we can say we need to import something from react-redux. So we can say import from react-redux, and what I want to import is something called provider. All right, and what this does, it just connects our global states, our store, to our entire app down here. So this is actually very simple. All you have to do is just make some space here and wrap everything inside this provider. So all your app, your whole app now has access to the store. So this only takes one argument, which is store, and we can just pass in this store. All right, so this is like my store, and it takes in one parameter, store, my store. All right, but I gave it the same name just to keep it simple. So store, okay? And that's it. Now we have access to everything inside our app. Okay, so let's take a look how I can display, maybe I want to display the counter. So how can we do that? I'm going to close everything up here like that. Okay, so you can do this from basically any component you want. Any component you want to access, you can run this. So all you have to do is to access a piece of state. So maybe I want to use, again, I just want to use this. Let me close this one. We don't need that anymore. Maybe I want to access the counter. Okay, so what I can do is I can import something called useSelector from react-redux. Okay, and now in here, let's say I don't want to say hello, I want to say counter, and here I want to add the actual number of my counter. Okay, so what we can do is we can say useSelector, and then I can extract that counter from my state here. I can extract this. I can say const counter equals to useSelector. This is going to be a function here, and I'm going to have access to the entire state in here. So this runs another function here, and I have access to this whole big state. All right, so this state up here, I can have access to everything. So I can just pull out state.counter from here, and that's it. Now I can display it here if I want. I can say counter. Oops, too much view. Counter, hit save, take a look, counter is 0. At the same time, I can also extract is logged in if I want. Maybe I have some sensible data here. Let's say I have, let's see down here, I have H3 that says valuable information I shouldn't see if I'm not logged in, okay? And in here, what I can do is I can extract that is logged in if I want. So this one, I can go up here and say const is logged. I can set this equal to useSelector, again, just state, and I can extract state dot is logged. So we're gonna write that is logged, and boom, we have access to it if I want. All I can do, maybe I can add a conditional statement here and say, hey, if is logged, like so, then I want to run this HTML here. Else, I don't want to see anything, so I'm gonna pass in an empty string. Okay, so if this is true, this is gonna show up. If it's not, then nothing's gonna show up. And as you can see, nothing shows up because our is logged is false. Okay, now how can we modify this? So how can we increase the counter? I'm gonna add 2 buttons here. Button is gonna say plus, and I'm gonna add a minus as well. So minus. Okay, very cool, but how would we actually increment and decrement this? We have our plus minus here, but nothing works. So we would create an action for that, and when we click it, we dispatch that specific action. So in my actions, I just made an index.js here, it's empty, and this is gonna be very simple. All we're gonna do is create an export const. I'm gonna give it the name of increment, all right? And all this does is it's gonna return an object again with just the type of increment, all right? So that's gonna be the name of it. And remember, when we dispatch this, this is gonna go into our counter here. It's gonna check what type of action type, all right? The type is increment. So it's gonna return this piece of state plus 1, okay? So this is all we have, just a function, again, that returns an object. Good. So in here, I wanna execute that. So what we do is we import our action. So I'm gonna say import increment from our actions. So /actions, all right? Again, we don't have to add index because it's gonna automatically know. And then one more thing I'm gonna import from react-redux is something called useDispatch, all right? This gives us the ability to dispatch an action. And in here, I'm gonna say const dispatch is gonna be equal to useDispatch, like so. All right, in here, I want to add an onClick, so whenever we click, I want to dispatch that function. So I'm going to add just a callback function here. And I'm going to say dispatch my increment. All right, so I want to execute this increment, like so. Okay, run this. Let's take a look back here. It's increment. Let's not misspell that. And everything seems to be working. All right, let's go to our state. As you can see, it's still 0, but when we hit plus, look, it updates to 1. So that's very cool. Boom, 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 5, 6, 7, and everything works the way we want. And we have the difference here, which is really cool. It shows us what changed. So let me refresh this. As you can see, if I hit plus, it's gonna say, oh, our counter increased from 0 to 1. And as you can see here, it also shows us the function that, the action that ran. We do it multiple times. I can even jump back to 1 if I want to see. I can jump back here to see my state in this position. And yeah, there's a lot of cool things that you can do with this dev tool. It's really well made. You can also play this back to see what you did. Take a look. Very cool. Okay, so that works. Let's also hook up our decrement. To do that, we can just go back to our actions, copy paste this down here, just add decrement and decrement, like so. app.js, we import the decrement and kind of copy paste this. So let me just delete this, copy paste this down here and just change this to decrement, and everything should still work the same way. Plus, 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 minus, minus, minus. Yep, everything works perfectly. Okay, lastly, I want to show you this. What if I want to have an argument here? So I want to have an actual piece of data. Maybe I want to increment this by 5, like so. So what you need to do is, let's say, increment by 5, hit save. I'm going to go back to my actions here, and I'm going to add something else to this. So now it takes a parameter here. We added 5. So it's going to take, let's say, maybe a multiply, or the number I want to change it by. So maybe it's going to take in a number of increment. So here, what you can do is add a piece of data, and you're going to see that people usually say payload to this. So I'm going to return also the number I want to increment by. So I'm going to add number here. Okay. So now in my reducer, I'm not going to return state plus 1. What I can say is I'm going to return state plus action.payload. All right. So this 5. So 0 plus 5, and then it's going to be 5. It's going to say 5 plus 5. So let's take a look and take a look. Now we are incrementing by 5. Okay. Okay. Oh, I talked so much. All right. It's time to go. So sing me a goodbye song. All right. I'll let you sing. Sing the goodbye song, and I'll walk away. Goodbye, my lover. Goodbye, my friend.